I was told no a lot, like you can't do this and you can't do that and you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. And I sort of totally rebelled against everything and just wasn't feeling any love for life anymore. I felt like I was totally stripped of myself, what I love to do. I was feeling really trapped.
Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. I'm Cherie Burton, and interviewing Julie, who's a new friend, has reminded me of the importance of cultivating community with like-minded women because we're all in this together. And so being vulnerable and speaking our truth in these safe spaces is going to be integral to our emotional, spiritual, physical, and social well-being. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is Cherie Burton, and I love that we get to bring the souls of women together through some raw honesty and shared experience and just creating that unity and that radical self-compassion that we're all on this journey just to try to cope with the things that have shown up in our lives and moving forward to create bright futures. I've got Julie Ann Hirsche with me here today on the podcast. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. And she'll share some of her life story and journey, so I won't give too much away other than to say that she did have a near-death experience as a teenager, and she'll walk us through that a little bit. But I first knew about her because the lady that I go get my hair done with, she worked in that same salon, and it just turned out we had a couple of mutual friends that are close. And so it's been really interesting that it's come full circle that we're having this discussion because we were like friends once removed or something. But I can already tell that she's going to become my friend. So whatever. But yeah, so her journey has taken her through some interesting ups and downs in relationships and personal growth journeys, but she claims that the last 10 years has taught her how to let go of others' issues and how to offer them gifts of clearing and opportunities to heal. And so she's never felt better. And learning to trust gifts that she has and supporting other people and hold form for creating their own dreams and desires. So she has this cool 14-day challenge thing that she does, and she's just got a lot to offer in guiding people to their soul purpose. So, Julie, do you go by Julie or Julianne?
Either one.
Either one.
We could do whatever's better. Yeah.
Julie's shorter. And what's interesting is
yes.
I didn't tell you this before when we talked, but I have an aunt that took her life when she was 32, and her name was Julie Ann.
Oh, how interesting.
Every time I hear those two names together, I'm like, that's neither here nor there. So
yeah, all part of our experiences, right?
Yeah. So tell us, Julie, how you came to the space that you're in right now, which is obviously very empowered, very gifted, and very attuned to the souls of women.
Oh, well, thank you, first of all, and thank you for having me on and for allowing me to share part of me, because I too believe that if we can continue to join together and share our stories and understand that we're not alone in this process, this experience that we're having, the more connected we are, the bigger and stronger and greater we become.
Absolutely.
So I think, just for me getting to that spot, it took a long journey. I've had a lot of interesting experiences, just like you kind of recapped, with relationship issues, health issues, and just a lot of different things. And so for me now, where I'm at now, I can look back and I'm a completely different person. Like 360 degrees times 10 times 100. And I couldn't have done it without the experiences that I had up until this point in my life. And
I've heard it said, like, you can't judge your past by the light level you now hold. Like the light level you had then. Can't go back and like compare the two.
Right. And that's a great way to put that. You can say all sorts of words like that, but
yeah. So what have you walked through that you feel like, as looking back, you can kind of like have compassion on the person?
I think for me, like kind of just wanting to like follow up with your question, like, what do you like? What really has motivated me to want to maybe give back? Where do I feel like I can really empathize with other women? And I feel like I've been through, I was a birth mom as a young teenager and placed a child for adoption. And that was a huge impact on my life. And so I feel like I can give back a lot of empathy and compassion to women on either side of that fence. I was diagnosed with a chronic illness, type 1 diabetes, at a young age, and went into a really dark, depressive, lonely space with no light, and had my near-death, suicidal attempt experience. And that really showed me that I did have a choice.
How old were you when you made that suicide attempt?
I was only 17 years old. And
such a tender age.
Right? And I look back now and I was just a baby. I mean, yeah, there was just so much going on at home. And I'm the oldest of 4. Well, actually, there's 5 girls in my family. And my father worked a ton. And I just didn't have a great relationship with my mother. And I think that being diagnosed with a major life-changing disease, I didn't believe I was supposed to live until 30 even. Like, it was an odd diagnosis and kind of belief system that got kind of put into my head. And so I was told no a lot, like, you can't do this and you can't do that and you have to do it this way or you have to do it that way. And I sort of totally rebelled against everything and just wasn't feeling any love for life anymore. I felt like I was totally stripped of myself, what I love to do. I was feeling really trapped, is the best way to put it. Like, you can't do that, you can't do that. And so, yeah.
I'm going to poke that a little bit. Like, what were those about?
I think not feeling like I was good enough really runs through it when I think back at that point. Not feeling like I was being given something that truly I didn't see as a gift at all. And now I do. So looking back, I could look at it and go, why me? Why do I have to suffer through this? And why don't I have anyone else that I know? Why have I never heard of this before? Why can't I connect with anyone? I mean, we're so fortunate now to have this ability to connect. And when I was younger, we didn't have that. I went to a doctor's office and they said, you have this and you have to do these things. And I didn't understand that. I felt like I did something wrong and I was being punished. And so therefore interpreting it as you're not good enough.
Do you think some of that may have come through? I know you and I have had a couple of discussions around this, religious programming or some beliefs?
I think, I think that growing up in a culture where I really was in a very strong religious background and trying to follow the rules and maybe being the oldest and maybe feeling some rebellion on different levels and not really knowing, I felt out of control, if that makes sense. Even more like I couldn't control what was going on. So I just kind of lived in fear. I lived in fear of everything. I lived in fear of sleeping because I knew I wasn't going to sleep very good. I lived in fear of waking up and not feeling very good when I woke up and not being able to get to school on time. I lived in fear of pleasing my parents and my family and honestly, God, like, you obviously are punishing me in my head at that time. Why do I have to handle this now? What did I do to deserve this? And maybe I'm not good enough, and not understanding any love from any other source but myself. It just wasn't there, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, I think that is, I mean, how old were you when you placed your baby for adoption?
So that happened about 1.5 years after this event. Okay. And so I was just barely 19 when that happened.
And some of my listeners may or may not know this. I've been fairly open about this of late, but I'm also a birth mom. So I placed a baby girl for adoption when I was 25. I'm now almost 50. I will be 50 by the time this airs.
Right.
And there's nothing like that.
Right.
I don't care if you're a teenager or a young adult or a mature adult. If you pass through, having a child and placing that baby into the arms of another mother, there's nothing more unnatural for your body to go through than that, because your entire body and being are programmed to parent that baby. And one of the things I've researched over the years is birth mother grief. It's a whole different level of grief. If you're in the hospital and you have a baby who dies, they call you an angel mom. And I don't mean to undermine that, because that's heart ripping. But when you're a birth mother in the hospital and you have a baby, you're kind of scorned. People don't know what to do with you. There's shame around it. So compounding, for you, compounding the chronic disease of diabetes, which is life-altering in and of itself. And then, adding, the crippling grief of being a birth mom, and that kind of experience, it shapes you. You have to grow up really fast.
Right.
So with your near-death experience, so that was before you were a birth mom. With your near-death experience, what have you noticed as a result coming out of that? I know some people report, they learn more about love, the importance of love. They have an expansion or an opening of some kind of a gift. What was your experience with that?
So this is what's so interesting, as until pretty recently, I haven't wanted to accept that I did have that kind of an experience. I looked at it and just thought it was kind of weird. I knew that I was dying, and I was shown an image, and I can remember very clearly seeing the moon setting and the sun rising almost at the same time, but feeling like I was laying in quicksand. And it was almost like a lightning bolt struck when I said yes. And I kept remember hearing voices like, do you want to live? Do you want to live? And as soon as I said yes, it was like I literally had someone shock my heart. It was really interesting. I was alone in my room on the floor. And I, at this point, had, with the diabetes, if your blood sugars are high or low, you really do have odd kind of feelings physically at times. And so I think I just associated this vision that I had and these thoughts and these words that I was hearing as me just being crazy or having this feeling because my blood sugar was high. But as I've come more aware of the other spiritual guides and angels and Earth Mother that I believe we all are connected to if we choose to connect, I'm now aware of that moment and looking at it and saying, I was totally offered a choice and given a path to go on. And I was told it wasn't going to be easy, but I was also told that I was shown that there were people that were there for me. And I had to really accept that. So it's almost like I can look back now and I have moments or times where I'm with other people and I'm almost able to feel in a way. I'm really sensitive to feeling people's emotions. So I was feeling all these emotions. I believe in that point, that was my gift, is I was able to feel what it would feel like to pass to the next life or to choose to stay. And so I was offered a gift of feeling. We're not going to necessarily give you visions, but we're going to allow you to feel all these people's pains and their sufferings so that you can help push them through and experience light and joy and happiness again, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I've kind of made it a hobby to read near-death experiences. My
Mm-hmm.
kids laugh at me because literally, like if there's one that comes out, I go get it and I read it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm fascinated by it almost seems to be like a universal theme,
Mm-hmm.
that when they come to that crossroads of whether they're going to go back into their body or continue on journeying through the other side, that the message that becomes very clear, whether it's kind of a downloaded message or whether they hear, audibly or have communion with other spirits that tell them that it's all about love, that that's
Mm-hmm.
all there is.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most important thing that this life is
Mm-hmm.
about. Did you have any kind of experience around that, or any later processing around what
Yeah.
that
So,
came
okay.
through?
So, and interesting that you bring that up. So I just kind of had a memory that pop in that where I feel like my journey kind of began even before the diabetes. I was really close with my grandmother, and as little children, they lived kind of in our backyard. So we'd hike up this little trail, and we'd stop and pick fruit, raspberries, and we'd dig around in the dirt, and we'd sneak in her back door and sneak up behind her recliner, and she'd always pretend that we scared her to death, right? And we would just get the biggest hugs, and there was so much love from her, and she would just sit and read with us for hours and hours. And I never felt anything but an immense love from her. And at the age of 12, she passed away from cancer.
Mm.
And I, at being so young, I think I was pushed aside as not, why would you care? You're not grieving, if that makes sense. And so I look back and see that and go, I lost the sweetness and the love in my life, therefore manifesting diabetes, where
Mm.
sugar and sweetness is kind of a diabetes
Right.
term. And so I have now processed through losing that love and that huge hole. But also when I did have this experience of dying, that's what I felt, was that love, that exact love from her, and her seeing her in
Mm.
visions in my head, thinking that they're just dreams or something not real. But I have seen her and felt, I could feel that immense love that I couldn't
Mm.
feel from anyone else. It was totally different than anything I've ever felt.
Mm. Well, that's beautiful. And I think, I think we're almost every human being has somebody that whether it's, and often it's a grandparent, usually grandma,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
who, and maybe it's just because they're later, they're more advanced in years and they've been around the block and they've learned what's most important,
mm-hmm,
but who has someone in their life that's shown them what love feels like. Not just like, hey, I love you, or,
mm-hmm,
whatever, pumping
mm-hmm,
you up. But they genuinely make you feel a certain way, or around them you feel a certain way. And so that's a beautiful message for you, that you were able to experience that with your grandmother. So I want to just kind of roll forward a little bit. So after you placed your baby for adoption, was it a boy or a girl?
It was a little girl.
And
Yeah.
has it been open? Have you been able to have any contact, or?
Mm-hmm. So because I was I hate even saying this or labeling it at all, but I was in a sexual assault situation, but with a known person. So it was
Mm-hmm.
really tricky because I knew the person, but then it just turned, one thing led to another, and I couldn't make what was happening stop for me. And so I went in to the hospital and the adoption, very clearly stating that I was in fear for her safety as mine too, when she was born, and different things. So I actually was in the hospital under an alias name. The family only knew me by my first name, and I only knew them by their first name. That being said, so we weren't in a real open situation, but they sent me letters and pictures to the office of the adoption agency. Once a month, I was able to pick those up until she was 3. and then once a year for a couple more years, and then nothing after that until recently. We reconnected and met actually for the first time.
Oh, wow. So wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's kind of
cool.
it was really cool. So I knew what she looked like. I knew where she lived. And there's a lot that kind of has happened in there, but I actually ended up seeing her at a dance recital for my niece. And I saw her on the stage, and it kind of triggered me. It like freaked me out a little bit, and I got pretty emotional. And then the next day I just literally walked into her in the grocery store parking lot. And I had not even planned it, nothing. I had been on the phone a little bit with her mom, just reassuring her mom, because I feel like I was the vessel to get her here. And that's what I have put in my head to help myself, get through the situation.
Yeah.
And so speaking with her mother, I could only imagine the immense fears and worries that she may be having, that I'm going to try to come into their life more, take over, whatever. I didn't want to do that. So I had these conversations with her mother, like, trust me, you're the mom. I'm leaning on you. Let's not meet until you guys feel it's ready, that sort of thing. And please know you're her mother through and through. And I really believe that I'm here. I brought her to your family for a reason and a purpose. Obviously, I would love to meet her. I want to help support her the best that I can, but let's keep it in your court. So then when I just randomly saw her after this intense conversation with her mother in a parking lot, it was pretty...
How old was she?
She was 18, just barely had turned 18.
And so did she know who you were?
Yes, she knew who so she, oddly enough, and she's kind of funny about it, but she had been kind of spying on me through social media, through some of my sisters. And they didn't really know that she had friended them, and she had gone in and she'd been following me for years. Knew exactly what I looked like, kind of where I was at and what I was doing. So she knew exactly who I was when I saw her.
Wow.
So her family was extremely open with her. They wanted her to know she was adopted. They wanted her to know that they wanted her and that they were praying for her to come. So they were trying to avoid that abandonment feeling
right
for her, which I love and I think is amazing. And she really is a great kid. I mean, she's did a lot of things. She looks very similar to me, but definitely came from a different family. Like you can just tell, was raised in a different family. So I think she could communicate with me more if she chooses, but it really kind of is up to her at this point.
Yeah.
But pretty interesting.
Well, and adoption is such a, it's so multifaceted. I have adopted 2 children through private, 2 private adoptions. And I'm also a birth mom. So and my story is, it's open. My adoption is very, very open. It has been from the beginning. So it's interesting to hear the other side that, I always just, I have this theory, and I can tell you this because you're a birth mom. I think that because there is, I can't think of a sacrifice that's greater than doing that for your child. Like for any kind of act of love, I can't think of anything more profound than sacrificing a child and giving them to another family. So all of the stereotypical things we hear about a girl who would give up, quote unquote, her baby is really just complete and utter nonsense.
I agree.
It's just so courageous and heart-wrenching. Okay, so when you had your near-death experience, you said you saw kind of like the sun and the moon sort of crossing, which every time I see that symbology, and maybe it was literal, but I sun is masculine and moon is feminine. Have you processed anything around that? Do you think there was something?
Yeah. So this is another really interesting thing too. My grandmother that passed away, it's so odd that I keep going back to that, but her name was Olia, which interprets as the moon or as the light of Christ. So not to bring any religion into it, it just has kind of some more symbolic meanings that I've kind of dove into to process those visions and feelings. And so for me now, looking at that and saying the moon does have a very divine feminine light, and it's so soft and subtle and can be so much more healing, where the sun for me, when I process, is more of a personal healing stream of grace that comes in, that's can be very powerful if you want it to be. And so the masculine piece of that and the balance between the two, totally huge for me. 100%. And it is just makes it that more interesting that this grandmother of mine, where I feel like all of my things started to kind of fall, but they were stepping stones to become where I'm at now, really do connect to that moon and that moon energy. So.
Yeah. I really have kind of made it my quest in life to understand the divine feminine and the implications for our day and kind of what's shaking out on the earth right now. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Oh my gosh, we could talk about that for hours. Like I literally, okay, and my honest opinion here, without trying to hurt anyone's feelings or getting political at all, but you can't have a female without a male, and you can't have male without female. And it's not even as a separate thing and creating life, but it's within yourself as well. So for me, it's huge. The divine feminine is huge. There has to be a balance, and the traditions of our Western culture and a lot of other cultures have been to suppress that divine feminine. And I believe it's because of fear, because it is so powerful.
Yeah.
And there was a time on this earth 2,000 or 3,000 years ago when that divine feminine was worshipped and Mother Earth was worshipped. And you look back on those histories and the earth was fertile. Things were growing. Communities were thriving. And so this dark time that we've had and this focus on this masculine energy, and I believe even as women these days, I am totally part of this, that feel like we need to be the ones that work and make all the money and do all the mom stuff. It's huge. We have to find a balance. But that divine feminine has been suppressed for so long because people are so fearful of it, because it is so powerful.
Right.
So powerful.
Absolutely. And some of my world travels, pilgrimages, and things that I've done have really witnessed to me that, we are in the age now where it's almost like an evolution of the feminine, and not just for women. I mean, men have feminine energy, as you know, and that's going to awaken in men as well. And so we are sort of women, like you said, you can't have a man without a woman and whatever. And that's totally like bioscience, right? And from a spiritual perspective, why would it be any different? We don't, I think we're coming out of the hugest dark age ever.
I agree.
It's been, like you said, since the patriarchy dissolved, goddess worship, and a lot of these temples that were erected to the goddess. And, you have everything from Isis in Egypt to Asherah from the Jewish traditions. And these women, the feminine was worshipped. And like you said, it was a time of rich, creative, fertile energy that was coursing through the planet. And when you cut that off and you go straight in, it's very regimented and structured. And of course you have the divine masculine, which is beautiful. But if you're not balancing it with the divine feminine, that's why we have all these problems, wars and contentions and strifes, and all in the name of oftentimes ideas and religion and beliefs. So I'm excited for this time. I'm sure that you're probably seeing this a lot when you work with women, that for so long in the generations of our grandmothers and their grandmothers and whatnot, it's just been this collective silencing. And now is the time for that to go away.
You're right. And I truly believe that as we do things like these podcasts and we're finally able to speak our truth, that we're planting seeds more and more and more. And like you said, the men too are awakening. And if we can continue to just do what we're doing and allowing ourselves to really just speak freely. My grandmother on the other side, exactly what you described. She stayed at home. She did the things she was supposed to do, but she was an amazing, talented, artistic woman. But I never wore any makeup, never wanted to bring any light or any show to what she had created or done. And to me, I feel like a lot of my processing later in life was to clear that generational kind of gap and problem with being beautiful, not only on the inside, but on the outside, and creating beauty. I mean, this woman would do these bronze statues that are unreal of a woman in the nude, not super detailed, but in the nude. And she would pin a towel up over these statues because she didn't want people to see that, but she was feeling that.
It was just femininity in her. She just had to express that. Yeah.
Yes. And so for me, it's like, I need to really clear through that, because I feel like I've been very blessed to have kind of a slimmer body shape and long, pretty hair and all of these things. But I was never taught, I was always taught actually that that doesn't matter. You shouldn't highlight those things. You shouldn't stand out amongst the crowd. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. And so now looking on that and embracing more of that divine feminine, it's not about the getting the oohs and the ahs and that sort of a thing. It's about owning who you are and saying the power in that. This is me, and I can be beautiful and do beautiful things and not feel judged or tormented because I've chosen to highlight those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I had to work through all that as well when I was running for pageants as a married mom.
Mm-hmm,
and really seeing that it is spiritual to I keep going back to, from a biblical standpoint, why would you light a candle and put it under a bushel? When we let our light shine, we glorify deity. I don't think we just glorify God. I think we glorify Goddess. And as women, we don't have a lot of role models that take us through healthy ways of and I'm talking even in the scriptures, right? I love Queen Esther. She's like my heroine. But yeah, so when we move through, this new age of, coming out of women being silenced and, patriarchal regimes and the suppression of the divine feminine. And now we know I think there's going to be a mass awakening. I couldn't put a time limit on it, but I would say within the next 5 to 10 years, it's just going to blow open out and not seem weird. Whereas right now it's still a little bit fringe for us to talk about it. But I can't not talk about it. I'm at the point where I can't not talk about it.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's people who are maybe intimidated or don't know what to do with it or don't have a construct or a paradigm around it or in fear of it. I just had to go within into my own soul and say, how do I actually feel about this and what rings true and what doesn't?
Well, and that takes my thoughts back to growing up in a really strict religious culture and being told that maybe you don't know and you're not perfect and you're never going to be, but kind of feeling pressures to do your best to be perfect. And so not trusting what our instincts are telling us. And maybe we shouldn't say anything or speak up in fear. It's always in fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong things because we don't want to be punished. And that's my interpretation of kind of how I was raised. But as I've become a parent and started to have my own children, I can now have a little more empathy and compassion and understand that my heavenly mother and father are not punishing. They're not going to punish me. They just want to love me and help support me so that I don't have to have the hard times or the trials, or I can find the education and the learning that I need in order to get me to the next space. But I tell you what, it's like hitting your head against a stone wall if you can't allow yourself to, first of all, start to question and ask these questions, and then really start to speak these questions. Like you're saying, where it's kind of on the fringe. I can look back 8 years ago when I really feel like I really did start to focus on this journey, and how odd it still felt to me to even talk about divine feminine, talk about spirit, talk about energy. That just felt weird. But now that I've kind of owned it and I've started my 14-day challenge and hopefully teaching people just basic things about these different energies, it's like I've come into a space where I'm like, I don't care. I'm not trying to please anybody anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think you do. I think you just get to like, you know what? I don't care how this is received. If I don't talk about this, I'm going to burst.
Yes.
And that's the whole reason I started the podcast, because I was like, okay, first of all, I could talk anyone's ear off all day long. But second of all, these are so relevant and so essential to own these parts of us and this part of our history, and the soul sovereignty, which I've really, really become convicted and passionate about, is being your own, having your own inner authority and connecting to, you know, both the masculine and feminine aspects of who we are. And like you said, clearing the generational issues to create a space for that to express. Because if one of the other things I've learned is it takes more energy to suppress and repress than it does to express. So we're taking all of these, you know, when something comes up, we want to push it down. Oh, I don't know how it will be received. I don't know if it'll be too painful, whatever we're thinking, or I'll be rejected or whatever. So we push it down and push it down. And finally, it just becomes more painful to push it down than it does to talk about it.
I agree.
When you get to that juncture, that's when you know you're going to start to be an influencer. And you know that you don't care anymore. Well, you do care. We'll always care, but like it's like it has to come out of you.
Right. And it's a fine balance between being mindful, but still, you know, staying in tune enough to know when and where and what. And it just takes time to learn that process and that mindfulness of where we're at and where the people that we are at, and removing the ego from the situation. And for me to process it as coming about like a teacher that I want to educate and teach, it helps me feel a little more safe for whatever reason, because it's not about my ego. This isn't about me. This is about, I've owned that these questions and these thoughts and these ideas are real. I've seen them for real because I've tried for too long to push them away, and it doesn't work. So when I finally allowed to set those free and just be me, it's so, life becomes so much easier. You find so much more joy, so much more happiness. You find yourself connecting with new friends like yourself, and understanding that there are other women out there that are feeling the same feelings, that are on this journey, that these seeds have been planted and these questions have been asked. And it's so, I don't know, it's just so enlightening and loving and freeing, really, to be able to speak in this way openly.
It is. And I think that, you know, we're going to see more and more women emerge who, you know, they're having relationships are falling apart. They're feeling suicidal. They're financially bereft. They're having some kind of a healing crisis, whatever it might be. Those are all gateways and portals to awakening to who you really are. And I think it's a rite of passage. I think that you can't become a healer, a leader, or an influencer, or even an enlightened person until you pass through the suffering and the darkness and really just the forgetting of who you are and completely having an identity crisis. I think that it's crucial to go through those things. Otherwise, you're not really qualified to help people.
Right. No, I agree 100%. And it does feel like a crisis. And for me, the thing that ultimately rings through that has kind of been a message for me too, is we always have a choice. And if we can look back and see our choices that we've made, and if we can start to recognize our patterns in those choices, then we start to really be able to choose to change that pattern and make that difference start to happen and stop the crisis from happening and get out of that victim mode and mindset and let people think what they may and just be us and love. And it is, you're so right. Just loving people and let them be who they are and just love them unconditionally.
Which makes life more enjoyable. I mean, really.
Mm-hmm.
The checklist and the trying to be perfect thing, it's miserable.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't work.
and it keeps you out of really connecting with others.
Mm-hmm.
So let's fast forward because we're going to kind of wrap this up. So you're married now. You have children that you're in the middle of raising.
Mm-hmm.
Give us kind of a little snapshot of how you kind of came out through all these really difficult experiences and are in your zone of power at this point.
Right. Well, I see my weakness as being extremely stubborn as a strength at this point. So just my desire to continue to work really hard. That's one thing I know that I've been blessed with, that I know how to get my feet on the ground and get to work. And for me, it was seeing that these changes needed to happen, or I was literally living the life of insanity in this victim crisis mode. And I am on my 4th marriage, and I kept choosing men that had addiction issues or codependency issues myself. And that's a whole other podcast we could go for.
You and I could do a whole podcast on codependency. I totally get it.
And addiction. We could go into that
addiction,
too, for hours, mental health, eating disorders. Anyway. So in fact, I met my husband now. He is a recovering alcoholic and kicking butt and so supportive of me. And you know what? It hasn't been perfect. And it took me figuring out who I was, learning and understanding boundaries, getting over my addictions and codependencies to people and feelings and wanting to please. And once I finally put my nose to the ground and understood that I matter and what I say and my boundaries are so important. And until we understand those things, nothing in a codependency relationship world ever changes. And I had to really take
one relationship to the next.
And I had to take responsibility that this was me. I was creating these things because I didn't know any different. I hadn't tried to work through it. I hadn't tried to accept that this was my choice and I was doing these things. And so now we are doing so well. I have my certification for interventions and mental health case management on top of doing the healing certification. And we both work with people almost daily to help keep them on a sober path. And I have 2 amazing kids, and he has 3 amazing kids between the ages of 9 and 19. So there's 5 altogether, and they're all doing great as far as we know. Everyone's healthy. And we're just excited to, especially at the end of this year, 2018, to keep moving forward in 2019. And we're both working hard to become aware of our choices and our patterns and keep our boundaries to ourselves and to each other and just keep working hard. And it wasn't easy, but we're here.
I love it. And you know what? Sometimes it reminds me of that song, God Bless the Broken Road That Led Me Straight to You.
Straight to you.
Yeah. We've all, So, wow. I'm sure we could just keep chatting and chatting up a storm.
We totally could. But
on a lot of a variety of things, because I'm really, really interested in healing with addiction. I work with a lot of people and I have family members and that are really in the throes of trying to recover. And some of them, it's just heartbreaking. And I've happened upon a few gems about addiction. So it'd be fun to revisit and talk more about addiction at a later date. But thank you so
definitely
much. Do you have any parting words, or just given all of the, we hit a lot of topics, but what would you say is your take home message for women, given, how old are you, if you don't mind sharing? Because
I don't mind at all. I'm almost 41 in about 5 days. So we'll hang on that. Thank you. I feel like I need to embrace that I am still young, but it definitely is a change for me to pass through.
I know.
But
I'm weirder. Like, I was weirder about turning 40 than I am turning 50. So I don't know what it is about 40. But yeah. So you haven't even lived half your life yet.
Right. That's what I see. So my grandfather is actually 98 years old, and I look at that and go, I'm 40. Yeah. I haven't even begun my life compared to him,
Well, and if you have a stacked of a series of life events, and you've stacked like you have, you're actually spiritually older than 41. So what can you offer us as some parting, I guess, advice or tips, or kind of to the heart of what you would like to share as we wrap this up?
I think just going back and thinking about the things that we have covered, the thing that really does ring true for me is really be careful to not allow yourself to be put in a box or have a label, that you always have a choice. There's always a way out of the situation, and you may not see it. And to please open your mouth and ask for help if you need it. There's so many good sources and places and people that if you're struggling or you have questions, to trust your instincts and trust that if you're shown someone or told someone is there to talk to help you to do that, to make that choice. It really is all about choices and allowing ourselves to be free from those boxes.
Yeah, freedom is really where it's at. Thank you. That's beautiful.
No, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for you willing to share with us today. I think that we can, again, we could have other discussions, and I'm sure we will at some point. But if people want to find you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
So super easy. It's my name. So if you have the name listed on the podcast, I don't know if they do that, but if you do that, but it's just Julie Ann Hirsche at gmail.com or just juliannehirsche.com.
Yeah. In case you're not looking at the direct link, her last name is spelled HIRSCHE. Is that right?
Yep.
Julie Ann Hirsche. Okay. Well, thanks again. And we'll continue to, I'm sure, talk. And I love the message just about, staying willing and open to choose to move forward. That's, I think that's what you were quoted that I read in your bio, is just trusting yourself and allowing yourself to stay open and willing to choose. And from there, miracles can be created. So thanks again, Julie. Great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day today.
You too. Thanks again to Julie for reminding us that it takes a community, it takes a village to raise us girls. And as women, we really are not alone. There are other women out there that are feeling exactly the way we are and experiencing the same feelings and challenges that we are. I don't know about you, but I find a lot of comfort in that not only are we women awakening to the feminine, but so are the men. So are our boys and our sons, and it's time that we stand in that solidarity for vulnerability and truth and beauty and expression.